Hey everyone, welcome to the #1 podcast for everything iOS. From news and how-tos to app and accessory reviews, this is iPhone and iPad Live.
It's June 6, 2012. I'm Georgia, and joining us today is the co-host of Iterate and CIO of Nickelfish, Seth Clifford. Hey, Seth.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, I'm good. Also joining us, we're very lucky to have Cubby's own David Barnard.
Hi.
Hey, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be here. We get to talk about my favorite topic.
Good. What's that?
App Store.
Rounding out our panel is, of course, the editor-in-chief himself of iMore.com, Rene Ritchie.
Nice to have you back, Georgia. We missed Seth one week and you the other, so it's good to have the full house, the entire Brady Bunch with us again.
It's good to be back and all together.
Center square to block.
I'd like to say hello to the chat room. If you are wondering why we are doing certain things or interacting, join the chat room. It's so much fun. And so I'd like to say hello to everyone that joined us live.
Yeah, if you're not in the chat room, you're not experiencing the show the way it was meant to be done. You've really got to get in there, get noisy, get loud, and tell us your opinions.
That is it. That is it.
They might have punch and pie in there. They won't invite me, but they might have punch and pie.
You're lucky.
It's going by pretty quick now. It's hard to keep track of that and talk.
We'll let Georgia sum it up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get started. WWDC, the App Store. Let's get through everything. Yeah.
All right, so last week, for those of you who didn't see it, and if you didn't see it, you're crazy. Go pause the show, watch the other show, then come back and listen to this. We talked about iOS 6 in excruciating demandment level details, and we didn't get a chance to finish, so we wanted to have David back to talk about the other side of the equation, because as much as iOS gives us great features, a few minutes in, we're bored. We want apps, and developers like David and like Seth have to give us those apps. Apple has to give them the tools to make them, and functional platform so that they can, feed their families while they're doing it.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that.
So, Dave, you've written extensively, and we have linked to you extensively about this topic. Maybe it's good to start at the end. You just released a new app, Timer. Liana immediately fell in love with it. It was our pick of the week last week for apps, but it was a very different kind of app for you. Can you tell us a little bit about it and why you made that choice?
Sure. So I'll try not to give you the too long a story, but building apps for me is really expensive because I don't code. When I founded my company in 2008, I wanted to code, and I got about a month into it, and I thought, this takes years, doesn't it? And so I saw Apple's apps and saw the level of polish, and I realized, if I'm going to make noise in the App Store, I need to deliver at that level. And so I hired a contract programmer about a month into founding my company in 2008, and I pretty much never looked back. So every app I've done has been with a contract developer. So Timer, my initial goal with the app was to test the shallow waters of the App Store. My plan was to hire it out to Eastern European contractors, who work for, say, $20 an hour instead of, most people in the U.S., both artists and coders charge $100, $150, and even up from there. So it's expensive. So Timer, I wanted to just do a quick app and get it out there. And I kind of got cold feet with contracting it out and decided to hire some good friends of mine. And really, it's just been kind of an experiment for me to see if I can get a quick app out there, to see if I can, come in on budget and in a reasonable time frame. And sure enough, Timer, I blogged about this the other day, but Timer came in, I guess, about almost 1.5 times my cost estimate, which is pretty incredible. Normally, it's like 3 or 4 or 5 times my cost estimate, and then it took us 2 weeks instead of 1, but some of that was even just due to scheduling. I mean, we probably could have knocked it out a little faster. But, so the App Store is full of a ton of half-finished apps. People start it, and maybe they have a good idea, or maybe they don't even have a great idea, but they just start coding. And building a great app is very hard, very hard. And so, they get 2 months, 3 months into it and say, you know what, this is just not going to, it's just not going to work.
There's no ROI.
Yeah, exactly. You get 3 months into a project and you realize you're so far upside down, you're just not going to make any money on it. So I think, I don't know what to even guesstimate, but, a significant portion of apps in the App Store seem like that kind of apps where either people just have bad taste and don't know what polish is, or they know what polish is and can't afford their time or money to polish an app. So
they're not finished, they're abandoned to the store.
Well,
exactly.
David, what exactly makes a great app? Because it seems like some people might not even know what that would be.
Oh, there's so much that goes into it. And I mean, I could say a lot of the obvious stuff, but and I don't say this to sound excessively prideful or anything, but I think one of the things people really underestimate when it comes to building anything really, but especially mobile apps is taste. Is that you really need somebody on the team who can say, hey, that looks good, that looks bad, that this needs more polish, this sucks, this or that's great. And I think a lot of people don't approach it from that standpoint, and their goal is functional, not necessarily beautiful or elegant or optimal user experience. It's just
they're not coding for humans.
If I can get the features that I want, I'm going to ship the app. And there's very little thought given to how the user experiences the app. The interactions of the app. You see so many apps like just copying stuff where, Clear has done, they did a pretty amazing job building a gesture-driven app. Well, now you have tons of people copying some of the gestures of Clear without even understanding it. So you're just throwing all this crap together and shipping an app. So I think a great app comes from an individual or a team who has the taste and the insight to understand how to polish an app, both visually and from the user experience standpoint, that the app is fast, that the features are intuitive, that things happen as a user would expect. So
when you tap the icon, it's like opening up an iPhone. It's an experience, and you're delighted.
There you go. And there's so much to that. We could talk for 4 hours just on that, but
we'll do that one day.
Yeah.
Sorry, Georgia.
Yeah, it seems like a easy thing to mention, but a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and that's something I said in my most recent blog post is that, I've been doing this for 4 years now and literally, dove head first. So I've been working probably on average 60 hours a week for the last 4 years.
Wow.
And I still feel like, even Timer, we're about to release a 1.1, and there's some things that I missed, user experience wise, and some rough edges that I wasn't particularly proud of. So even then, with all that experience and all that time invested, it's just a lot of work.
And Timer is a much smaller app than something like TweetSpeaker, which you did last time.
Right. I thought this was going to be like, oh, just throw it together in a few hours and put it in the App Store, and it could be polished and look great. But, once you actually start trying to polish an app, even if it's just a simple one-feature app, it's, there's just a lot to it.
Seth, I want to throw it over to you for a second because, it's a big issue, and the way Apple handles the App Store, to me, it doesn't feel like they're incentivizing great apps. It feels like a lot of the choices they've made for the App Store has pushed us towards this low-cost, free, freemium, almost, like David said, the shallower end of the app pool.
Yeah, that's definitely been kind of the net experience of the entire experiment. And you could argue that for any number of reasons. I think the one that we could probably all agree on is that at its core, Apple is a hardware company. They need to sell hardware, and in order to sell more hardware, you have to have software to run on it. And so by commoditizing the software that you can run on it and making it inexpensive and fun, they enable people to buy more hardware because there's continued added value to the hardware purchase. Whereas
but that only goes, I mean, I forgot what show we talked about this before. That only goes so far. And the more successful a platform, the more vulnerable it is. And the classic example is Atari. Atari was king of the world. And then a couple of years later, they're burying ET cartridges in the desert. And
yeah, and it's funny because I remember having ET as a kid and being completely disenchanted with it.
It was appalling.
Being so miserable and hating it so very much.
How did that game play? Like, really, I remember moving ET out, going to the left. I don't know what happened after that.
It was an experience so bad it killed a platform.
Ever.
And you can have cheap commodity apps and you can try to get around it with subscriptions or with in-app purchases, but at the end of the day, Apple has to make developers like you, developers like David, want to make the best apps that are only possible to be made on iOS so that users go to iOS. I mean, it's a platform. Is it true, David? Is it a platform value play?
I think it is. And I don't think Apple's been doing a great job managing it as such. And let me first just get out of the way. I think a lot of people perceive my ranting and some of the ranting of guys like Craig Hockenberry that we're just kind of the spoiled sports, that we're not making a ton of money, so we're going to, complain about the App Store because we're not making money. And that's probably true to a certain extent. I mean, neither of us are millionaires, and if we were, maybe we would look at things differently. However,
if you had Angry Birds money.
Yeah, if we had Angry Birds money, maybe we'd say, screw everybody else. But I think if you look at the core of our arguments, it's not just the App Store should be easy. Because anytime I tweet about the App Store, say something, people are like, business is hard. Why should the App Store be any different? It's a market. Markets are competitive. The App Store is a very competitive market. It shouldn't be easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And so I'm not arguing that making money in the App Store should be easy. I'm not arguing that I should be making more money than I am. But I think Apple did some very fundamental things, even from the very beginning, that did exactly what you're explaining, that shifted the market towards these gimmick apps versus incentivizing developers to create amazing apps. And that, we could talk all night on. What are some of your thoughts on why? And then I have a few.
Well, I'm gonna pitch it over to Georgia because it's something she's complained about for a long time, which is she likes gaming, and the market is designed to create right now crappy little games with a lot of freemium upsells that pop up all the time, and not the kind of games that those of us who played them, through all the platforms are used to.
It's really hard. You want to get a game. I don't mind spending a little bit extra money on a game that's well worthwhile, but it seems like the App Store is built for making the cheapest game. It's really hard to find the good games. And so you sell your, and I get it, you sell your game for like $5 and the game for $4 that's similar to yours might get more play. So I'm waiting for games that have good quality. Once I play a game, I will play it to death. I enjoy it. I like to play it, and I'm happy once I'm there. I don't want it to end. I don't care if, I have to spend another $3 for, a game instead, but make it fulfilling to that. So I think that the Apple, the way that it's marketing and the way that the App Store works, it pushes for a very low premium game that people are going to have to turn out in a quick amount of time because with so many games in the market, it's hard to get one notice, to the publicity, hit the front page, because how do you search the App Store? I go to the top 25. I do that myself, and I hear about all kinds of fabulous games and people send me. But still, that's the way that I'll find them.
There was an excellent comment that David made, I believe to Leanna and myself last Macworld, where he said that, let's say someone, and David makes App Cubby, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, but I'm going to say it anyway. David runs App Cubby and Gas Cubby, Trip Cubby. He has a lot of apps in there. So let's say someone's looking for a mileage tracker. They might go and type that into the App Store, and their inclination might be to get the free one. Try it out. Maybe they don't like it. They might get the $1 version, and then the $2 version. Maybe there's a $3, and they'll start working their way up, and eventually they'll get to an app like David's, in regardless what category it is. That's a really great experience, has a ton of work, a ton of polished, and they'll love it. But in order to get to that app, they have spent twice, if not more, the amount of money on the other apps. David's only earned half of what the customer is potentially willing to spend, and no one has had a great experience about it. And David, I'm not sure if that's just a conspiracy of problems or if that's just a fundamental nature of app discovery.
I think it's a conspiracy of problems. The largest of which, and I mean, I keep harping on this, and tons of people have harped on this since day one in the App Store, but not being able to try an app before you buy is a huge deal. And I think Apple thought they were at least partially solving that problem with the in-app purchase, but look what's happened with in-app purchase. You don't get trials or kind of limited feature sets, and then you expand the feature set. In-app purchase is just used for these crappy
freemium psychological torment warfare games.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm going to ask Georgia's opinion on that in a second, but I'll just point out that Google Play Store has trials. You have 15 minutes after you buy an app to decide to delete it, and if you delete it, you do not pay for it. Windows Phone is a bit different. You have various options. For example, you can have a time-based trial, which Microsoft actually discourages, or you can have limited features that are turned on. It's more like traditional software. But I think that's a fair point, George. You have companies like Zynga who actually go to psychologists and try to figure out how to make the most addictive game possible to extract the most money possible out of you, because they know that users have been conditioned not to play $1 for a game, but they are ego-driven to have a better Smurf hut than Seth, so they'll pay $99 for Smurf berries.
It's true. I'm completely there. And I know that you've been there as well. Like that feeling of, I'm suddenly playing Plants vs. Zombies, and it's like, oh, well, you can buy, instead of getting this much money, which is much harder to get in the game, you can spend 99 cents and get, 100,000,
dongleberries
to get extra games for the level. But I'm now at such a level of anger and animosity towards the push to do that. I won't. The first thing that I decided to do was, how do I crack the system and find a way to build a lot of money in the game, because I'm now so angry about that. I'm not going to do it. I do not.
You'll invest the time out of spite.
I will, and feel good in just, again, breaking the rules in order to find a better way to deal with that. So I'm farming the Yeti zombie constantly in order to, make money in a really quick pace.
Which but also that ruins the fun of the game. It's now about, calculation. It's not about enjoyment anymore. I'm doing math.
I don't mind the math. I just don't like the fact that they are pushing this way of getting money. I'd rather spend like $6, but just give me the game.
Well, the nice thing about
the full game. But I know that other people won't, so it's kind of like a push and pull.
The nice thing about trials, also, Seth, is it would totally solve the problem of scam apps, where you look at it and you think it's Pokemon, or you think it's some licensed property, you buy it, and it's a wallpaper. And you spend, $5 on it, and you have no recourse but to try the report abuse button in iTunes, where when you initiate a trial system, and it looks like there's nothing but upside to this.
Well, that, I think a lot of developers would tell you that cuts both ways. While for the consumer, that enables them to, I guess, make more educated purchases and get apps and try them and say, oh, this is not at all what I expected. I think a lot of developers would see that people would pay $5 for an app and download it and say, well, this doesn't do my laundry and make me toast like I thought it would, even though that wasn't in the description, so I'm returning it. And so I think that it's good because it would reduce the amount of scam stuff, but I think you'd see a lot of people returning apps as opposed to, well, maybe in addition to leaving, ridiculous 1-star reviews for the application.
Out of ignorance instead of out of an actual problem with the app.
Yeah,
but see, what does it incentivize though? And that's the thing. It incentivizes the sticky apps. And see, I hear that argument, and I mean, honestly, I think if Apple instituted trials, which at this point I've really pretty much given up hope that they will, but let's say they did, I think you would have a short-term drop in revenue because you could try 20 different 99-cent apps and then just keep a single 99-cent app. But I think over the course of months and years, the people who build great apps will realize they can charge more for those great apps. And so over time, the quality of apps will go up, and users being willing to pay $5 for an app will, I think the rubber band can be stretched back the other way. The problem is, people have got conditioned to expect free and low-cost apps. Steve Jobs even said that on stage when they introduced iAd, he said, we created iAd to help developers create free and low-cost apps. And that goes back to what Seth was saying at the beginning of the show. Apple is trying to incentivize, they're trying to get people to buy expensive hardware. Software is a complement to that hardware. So so if you buy if you get a contract for your iPhone and you spend $200 in a 2-year contract, if that $200 iPhone then costs $100 to buy software, it's a $300 value proposition. If instead you can buy that $200 iPhone, get Facebook for free, get Instagram for free, buy a couple of 99-cent apps and be okay, then you're looking at a $210 purchase decision versus a $300 decision. The problem is people end up spending that $300. It's just they do it 99 cents at a time on these crappy apps that they never use again. And so I think that the rubber band could be stretched back the other direction, is that right now people expect apps to be free and cheap, but if it flipped around and they could try before they buy, I think people would start to see the value in the apps and be able to purchase good ones. I think part of the 99-cent psychology is, I buy so many apps that are total crap. Why should I pay more for an app?
That's the worry. Is that you worry that I'm going to buy an app for $4 and it's going to be just as bad as the app that I could get for free. I think that your idea of having a trial, be able to play something for, even if it's a short period of time, you can play it for 2 days and try it out, and then after that you have to pay. That would really change the dynamic, in that, if I play 4 games and there's one that's amazing, and now I'm hooked, I'm already into the game, I enjoy that user experience, then I'll stay. And I don't mind having to pay that, $6 in comparison to $1, because I've already enjoyed that experience. And then experience would win over cheap.
Just for clarity's sake, Google did experiment, I believe, with different windows, and I think Microsoft did too. I think there was 24 hours at some point, and then an hour, and 15 minutes was established just because a lot of people, if it was a game especially, would have enough, and it was like just a way of getting a free rental at the end of the day. But with 15 minutes, it was not enough to satiate anybody, but it was enough to give them the idea. And also, you're not allowed returning the same app twice. So if you decide to download it again, you don't have another 15 minutes. At that point, you've bought it. So there are some safeguards for developers.
To be clear, I completely agree with David that we should have trials on apps. I think that it's the right thing to do, because that's how software has worked for a really long time in a lot of different spheres. You've been able to download, a shareware application and use it for a time period or with limited functionality and evaluate it and say, yes, this is what I'm looking for, or no, it's not. But at the same time, I think with the App Store's inception, when apps kind of became mainstream, there was probably, whether it was correct or not, there's an expectation on the consumer's part that because it's on my phone, it's going to be a little experience that should cost less automatically. The race to 99 cents began because obviously that was the smallest amount that a developer could charge. And then as a result, we have the situation that we're in now, where we have a lot of really lousy apps.
Just for fun, I put this in the article that I put up. It is the price of an app called Bug Me, which was available for the Trio right before the iPhone came out for the low price of $39.95 for a note-taking app. That app on the App Store today is $1.99 and is a way better app. So definitely our perception of value has changed. And also, trials don't necessarily have to be mandatory. They could be opt-in for developers who want to have that. And I know Apple was concerned about user experience, that someone would have an app, it would time bomb, they wouldn't know why their app stopped working. But I don't think a pop-up saying your time has expired, you have to buy this app now, would be any less annoying than $99 of Smurf berries to continue. You can do this. Try downloading this app. Have you rated us in the App Store yet? I mean, we're bombarded with so much crap.
A funny thing about the devaluation was, I was trying the PS Vita and I was using it, and I'm like, oh, this game is pretty good. It was a good game, augmented reality game that they had for it, and I was enjoying the user experience. It wasn't like mind-blowing, but I enjoyed it. And I'm like, oh, how much is the game for it? And they're like, oh, it's $59.99. And I went, what? For this game? I was like, no, there's no way. I put the PS Vita. I'm like, you can have the PS Vita. I'm all good with that. That being said, I guess there is a way around it. The people that would put a free application and then they have the paid version that is more and you get greater features. That is one way around getting both. People will try out, but there's a limited amount. You get them to, enjoy the experience, and then if they want, they upgrade. You just have to kind of, I guess, mediate how much do you give someone so it's good enough to have a taste, but eventually they would want more.
Yeah, not all apps are susceptible. Yeah, sorry, David?
Yeah, but that's really hard to do well, because if you think about, most apps, like let's talk about Apple's own apps, which they seem to philosophically just not think trials are a good idea. I mean, if you look at most of their apps now, and even over the last few years, they've been moving away from app trials. So I don't know, probably Steve Jobs, but who at Apple thought that was just the way to sell software, but that's how they sell software. But look at Pages. How would you turn Pages into a freemium app? Oh, you can type in the app, but you can't change the font.
Bold is 99 cents. Italics, 99 cents.
No,
it just doesn't.
Though I'll
it
be
just
honest,
doesn't
the
work.
changing of the fonts is a big deal to me. That actually might.
David, are you mocking Pencil's user experience?
I am that shallow.
Paper's user experience.
Well, no. See, I think Paper does it a good. Of the freemium apps I've tried in a while, I think Paper does the best job. It's a functional app and has two brushes when you buy the app.
Yeah,
and then it lets you try the brushes before you buy, so you kind of get a full experience. But the thing is,
I have a way, David. Apple would do it. You just can't copy and paste.
Yeah, until you pay you unlockable copy paste.
But see, that's the thing. Like, do you want to give your customers a bad experience and then hope they buy the full version? I mean, the whole point is to put your best foot forward. And so in-app purchase and this whole freemium thing has created this whole psychology of how do we give away just enough to then take even more. And that's not the psychology I want to use to build my apps. I don't want to think, you don't
want to milk your customers.
How can I give this away for free and then milk them on the back end? And how can I limit this app in as many ways as I possibly can and yet still give a halfway decent user experience so that they'll be incentivized to buy? I mean, those are things I shouldn't be thinking about as a software developer. I should be thinking, how can I build the best possible app that people will find value from? And there's always going to be economic concerns, and you always have to think about pricing and things like that. But trying to shoehorn most apps into some kind of freemium model is a futile exercise that frustrates both the developer and the user.
The one thing that we're kind of not hitting on, and I think this is why it is such a problem, is that for a really long time, software purchases were a subsection of a percentage of our culture, right? And now that these devices and software purchasing and, app downloads and stuff like that has been so normalized across, all kinds of people and all kinds of places, we're dealing with a very different mindset as to what people are willing to spend in terms of anything. People that bought software even 5 years ago that really sat down, evaluated software, and paid money for it were of a certain mindset that took the time to do it and decided what was right and what they needed and what they were willing to pay.
It was you, not your mom.
Yeah, and now what we're dealing with is a wide swath of the population for whom spending money at all is the last thing they want to do. They want everything for free, and that is a social problem that we're not going to be able to fix as much as we want the App Store to change. That is an economic problem, and that is a social problem that people do not want to pay money for value. They want everything for free. And as much as we want to develop good quality apps and sell them for $5, $10, $20, there are people that will never.
Well, here's my question, and this keeps challenging me, because people will pay $15 to go see a movie for a couple hours in 3D Mindoscope, and just because you went to see, and I said this before, because you went to see Star Wars doesn't mean you get Empire Strikes Back for cheap or for free. And I actually looked around, and on every mobile platform there is no upgrades. I thought maybe this was an iOS problem, because people keep saying, "Oh, we want upgrades. We don't want Tweety 2 and Twitterific 3 and the early edition 2. We want upgrade pricing, but Microsoft doesn't do it. RIM doesn't do it. Android doesn't do it. Palm didn't do it. There's a lot of obstacles put in the way of developers from making money in a traditional software sense. Sorry, David, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to debate Seth a little bit for a sec, because I think that's true kind of in a broader sense, in that, you know, people want things for free. But here's the psychology, though. You don't walk into Starbucks and think, oh, you know, give me a coffee for free. You don't walk in with that expectation. You don't even walk into Starbucks expecting a cheap coffee. You go to Starbucks because you want a certain experience, which I hate Starbucks coffee, but you know, some people I hear like it. But you know, you go to a nice restaurant. You expect a great experience, and you're willing to pay for that experience. And so you place a value on the experience. And so you touch briefly on the history of the App Store, and I think that's really a key to the argument here, is that prior to the iPhone, even mobile software was very expensive, and people didn't necessarily buy it in the volume they do now, but people would buy it. And sure, it was people like us who are nerds and had trios and things like that, but people would buy mobile software and pay money for it. When the App Store came out, 2008, July, I remember all these, 2009, I remember all these very vividly. Apple, the shape of the App Store created the race to the bottom. It was not just that it was a free market. It was that the way the top charts worked at the time incentivized the race to the bottom. So before Apple could even really think that much about the next version of the App Store or making significant improvements to the App Store, the race to the bottom happened so quick. And so by the time, you know, it was 2008 that the App Store came out. By late 2008, that free and low-cost app expectation had started to be set. And by 2009, it was cemented. And so, you know, in the infancy of mobile platform, of the future of mobile software, because, you know, I would say everything before it was a different part of software history, and the App Store in 2008 ushered in an entirely new wave of ease of use and ease of purchasing apps, and you know, you don't have to enter a credit card for every app purchase. I mean, you know, that was a huge deal when the App Store launched in 2008. So it is a completely new generation of buying software. And what happened is, in the infancy of this new stage of software, the shape of the App Store, the lack of trials, the top charts incentivizing low prices, all these things combined, and Apple has fixed some of them along the way, so it's hard to argue about those now. You know, like they have the top grossing list. Well, they put the top grossing list in, I think, late 2010.
And now it's freemium dominated.
Yeah, exactly. And it was after in-app purchase even. And so now it's the in-app purchase apps that are dominating the grossing charts instead of you know, high quality apps, you know, like Coda level apps. So much happens so early in the App Store, and I think that's what shaped the psychology. I think people expect apps to be cheap and free because apps are cheap and free. And I don't know if that psychology can now be reversed, but I don't think it's the inherent, you know, not seeing value in it that we're fighting against.
Is that the expectation obligation market, Georgia?
Well, I don't think that people... I think that people would not mind paying for an app that was more expensive, because we will buy, again, Apple's products are expensive. So it's not that people that buy Apple products don't mind spending the money for it. We will buy a Mac because it's a Mac. We expect it. We know that the user experience is fabulous. The problem with the App Store, one, is that Apple doesn't really care. They make their cut anyways, and most of their money is not made through the App Store. And no matter what, whether you buy the worst, you know, fart app or anything else that you get, Apple still makes their cut. So no matter what, they're making money on that. They have no incentive to encourage better apps to be made. The second thing is that, though I think that a lot of people would want to buy premium products, finding them is a nightmare in the App Store. It's a nightmare. Surfing the App Store, trying to find something that's new and different is horrific.
You can't just ask Siri to find you the best, turn-by-turn app or the best mileage tracker app.
No, and then so I will try an application that's expensive. I remember actually spending a good deal of money when we went through different cooking apps. There was a lot of them out there. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare to try to find something that was usable, something that was enjoyable, that had a good user experience, that would, grade it. Actually, some of the best applications were ones from very big websites that were free because they wanted the money through the websites. So finding the application, if we knew what applications were the best, and we had a list of that, I'm sure that people would not mind spending money for that. But that's not what Apple cares about. How do you change what Apple cares?
I'm going to throw it over to Seth in a second, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. I apologize. Ozatadev in the chat room is saying that it's hard to say Apple doesn't care about apps, but the only thing, Apple is inscrutable. The only way we can tell what Apple does and does not care about is by their actions, because Apple has very few words. And I think David's right. I think they launched the App Store, and even they didn't expect what would happen. They thought it might do well, but I don't think anyone anticipated this level of success. And not only was there a race to the bottom, but there is a race downhill through trees and rocks. And it's like watching Jackie Chan try not to fall and kill himself while engaging in that race. And Apple's doing the best they can to offer developers ways out, but developers are very cagey. Zynga is very cagey. Developers like that are very cagey, and they can take advantage of these things. I think it behooves Apple to have a high-quality platform, especially as Android becomes more competitive, as apps like Instagram and Instapaper start moving beyond iOS onto other platforms like Android. I think Apple has to care more. And I think at the end of the day, they haven't done anything to show this yet, but I think they absolutely have to pay attention to the overall value of their platform as the market gets more competitive. Sorry, Seth, I jumped all over you.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, David is completely right in that Apple set the wrong precedent when the App Store launched that software should be this, meager amount of money. But there are two things that I was thinking about as he talked. One is, unfortunately, people will always see goods and services and software as two vastly different things. No, you don't go into Starbucks and expect to get a coffee for free. But how many people in the public at large who buy, let's say, a Windows computer ever go and buy another piece of software? They use what came with it, and that's it. They probably don't even download stuff. And I'm talking about a huge percentage of people. I'm not talking about people who understand that there's apps that you can go and download.
People who have to buy Adobe software.
Right, exactly. Obviously not enterprise, anything like that. A lot of people just don't even know that you can buy stuff. They don't expect to get coffee for free or a car for free or whatever, because there's a tangible understanding there that, oh no, this is different than what I have. I have to, this costs money. This costs money to make. So at a fundamental level, there's a disconnect between the idea that goods and services are different than software, because software didn't take, hours and hours of someone's time and effort, and
a digital copy is free.
Exactly. They had to pay payroll and whatever. But wait, 1 second, hold on. The other thing that Apple did, and this is unfortunate, but this is how it is that they set that 99-cent price point with iTunes, with music. And in order to get people excited about apps, they said, well, apps have to be the same. They have to be 99 cents. People need a little tiny buy-in. They're never going to take off if we make them $5.
You're competing with free, right?
Exactly. And unfortunately, in order to keep the iTunes mentality of it's only a buck, that set the wrong mood early. And you're absolutely right that now it's very hard to break that habit, but people are in that zone. And
interesting to note that BlackBerry App World originally did not allow 99-cent apps. You had to be free or $3, right. But over time they have now dropped down to 99 cents. Yeah. I want to just move us along quickly because we're starting to run low on time. And I want to ask you guys what you'd like to see from Apple and the App Store in iOS 6. We have WWDC less than a week away. I know, Georgia, in the past, you've mentioned stuff like not kicking you out of the App Store when you buy something, or not asking for your password for free upgrades. What would you like to see from Apple next week?
Wow. I'd like to have a better way to figure out what would be the better apps in the App Store. So maybe they go through it. They sometimes have the featured lists. Something would be the, more specialized ways in there. I'd also like to see better games.
Can computers, because Apple bought Chomp, but my question to you is, and it's a good question for you, can computers can digital intelligence accurately predict the whims and desires of analog human brains? Because Netflix is famous for offering millions of dollars to do this better, and no one does it really well yet.
Here's what I think. Let me jump in here if you don't mind. Here's what I think is a holy grail of the future of the App Store, and I hope to God Apple is working on this, because I think it could potentially solve a lot of the problems that we're talking about here without necessarily doing anything particularly drastic. But through iOS and various analytics providers, and I think Apple might even have some of these analytics on their own, but if you could see the average usage, the actual usage of an app, and potentially in a social context, to see, people might download 20 different cooking apps, as Georgia did, but which one do they stick with? And so the computer problem is, if you just look at, she bought these 20 apps, and then you recommend those 20 apps for cooking, well, that's not solving a problem, because she didn't actually use those 20 apps. And so what Apple really needs to take into account with these social recommendations is, what apps are people actually using? What apps are getting launched? What apps are sticky? What are people coming back to? And if they can incorporate that back into like a real App Store genius kind of a feature, I think that will circle us back around to incentivizing sticky, great apps versus the apps that you buy for 99 cents and are a gimmick and you get rid of a week later.
I think that that's a really good idea for helping select which apps should be the most popular applications, or the most used applications per time. My issue with that is, the first thing would be security. I don't want them to know how long I use an app for what. It's a lot of information, and I can see how someone with Google would love to have that.
Georgia, the bad news is the games already do that. They check, they look at how often you play, at what level you drop out, so they can make that level easier so that you stay on the game long. They do a lot of this stuff already.
Yeah,
pretty much most apps in the App Store do that, even productivity apps.
Yeah, and the second thing is that, again, it's battery power that I would rather just my app to be on. I want, whatever I do to my phone, I'm like, I want to fly completely under the radar. So
you want a big stealth mode button.
The less analytics that they're taking from me, the better I would feel about it. But I do think that it would be a great thing for making suggestions to applications that other people have a good user experience from.
Well, how about this? I'm sure Apple's thinking about a lot of different options, and I haven't even thought of all the different options. But if they just looked at the time between installation and deletion, people curate their devices often enough that might even be an interesting metric. If somebody downloads an app and deletes it within 24 hours, that says something. If they download an app and never delete it, and that's not necessarily in-depth analytics, and that might not be as accurate as in-depth analytics, but it says something.
Yeah,
I've
that would work.
downloaded apps and deleted them in 20 seconds.
I have too, often, actually.
And the thing is, Apple is already capturing a lot of analytics, and it doesn't actually waste your battery as much as you might think it does, because what they do is they aggregate a lot of that data and then send it up once and very quickly. And we're talking about like bytes of data, not even necessarily kilobytes of data. Just tiny little files of text. So it's not a battery killer like you might think. Right.
No, I think that would be a good idea.
Seth, do you have any big demands for Apple in the App Store?
No, I think the trials would be a really great addition. And honestly, my biggest demand has been one that I've been talking about for at least a year or more at this point, and that's just whether you make it more easily searchable for the things that are pertinent to what I'm looking for. So like the top lists are absolutely useless to me. I can't use them in any capacity. If I'm looking for a specific app for a specific purpose, it's really hard to find the stuff, the long tail stuff that's really good that gets buried under the charts. So either have an app store that has a much more intelligent search, and of course they did buy Chomp, so that's one of those things that may end up coming to the App Store, or, which again, this second option will never happen, is have an App Store and a game store because games just run roughshod all over everything. And like every time I want to look at something, it's game, to do app, game.
Now, what about, so I know Craig Hockenberry and Will Shipley, I believe, have both mentioned this, but what about the idea of a premium app store, a boutique and a warehouse? All the crap goes into the warehouse, and Apple even more carefully curates a premium experience where higher priced apps don't have to compete with, frankly, 99-cent freemium stuff. Is anybody in favor of that?
I don't think they'll ever do that because then that kind of implicitly says these other things are not worth as much as these things. And even though that makes perfect sense that these are premium apps and these are all the other apps, I think Apple is less inclined to kind of denigrate that software set since that's really what's bolstering the platform.
But I think it would work out. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I think they could do that in a simpler way, though. They could even do something like show me apps that have been featured that have the word gas in them. Show me the apps that have been featured that have the word, whatever in them. And I think that's kind of a way to let their history of curation take effect without having to necessarily, throw a bunch of crap into this warehouse. But you could effectively, through some kind of search filter or otherwise, use the hand curation they have done in a more effective way. And of course, I'd be all for that because most of my apps have been featured.
And they do have the Hall of Fame and they do have the Essentials. They do have a lot of lists already. They're just not really accessible from iOS as much.
Yeah, they're lists that you have to go browse. But when you're thinking, oh, I need to, I'm about to play a bunch of games with my family and I want a scorekeeping app, and you go search Scorekeeper in the App Store, it's just a freaking mess. And, that's the experience that's the mess, is that, I'm sure a lot of people go to the App Store to browse, but it, and I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms, but I wish as developers we had analytics. I have no idea whether half my business is coming from search or whether 99% of my business is search and 1% of my business is, people coming from external links like Google and stuff. I have no idea.
So Apple adding that would be good for you for iOS 6.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But
yeah,
I would.
But that
was
search
wanting to know,
experience.
do either of you wish that they changed the rating system on the App Store? Like, does either you think that it's broken in the way that it is, that people can just, while something's you're just testing it out or there, that they can give 1-star rating no matter what, or do you think that it works?
No, it's broken. It's way broken.
I feel like I've just started to try and make peace with the world.
Is that learned helplessness?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I as broken as it is, at this point, it's just kind of like, you know what? People say what they're going to say. And I think what's kind of evolved, and maybe this is just part of the brokenness, is that people will look through the reviews and look for what they want to hear. So if you have 10 people saying it's total crap and you have 20 people saying it's great, they'll look for the thing is, a lot of the people who say an app is crap don't use proper English. They don't spell correctly. They don't use complete sentences. I mean, you can pretty much tell that they're not a great source to better understand the capabilities of this app. So as broken as it is, I think it's evolved into a somewhat functional system, but it's just a crappy system.
Apple did change it so that you had to buy the app before you could rate it. I mean, that was originally comical.
That was way back in 2008, I think, or early 2009.
Yeah, and it's what I found with the iMore app is we have a little button in there saying send us a tip, and I would say a good 90% of the time, instead of a tip, we get some complaint about the app. But it makes me feel good that they can actually send me that complaint and I can have a discussion with them instead of them just putting it up on the App Store. Because I think if they didn't have that outlet, their next step would be an iTunes rating, and we kind of relieved the pressure on that fire hose by having that function in the app.
Yeah, and half the reviews say, app doesn't do this or app does that, and it doesn't.
Why doesn't it make my coffee?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple other things that are interesting that Apple could or couldn't do. What about non-App Store distribution. I mean, it's famous. Side loading is famous. You can do it on some Android devices if the carrier doesn't lock you down. On BlackBerry, you can still download apps from websites. Palm has the RSS feed where you can get apps from. I don't think Apple would ever do this, but is it an option that, as a developer, David, you're still interested in? We're ever interested in?
You know, I never really got on the side loading bandwagon. You know, early on, I may have thought it was somewhat feasible, but you know, I started my company with the App Store. I mean, I didn't develop software or sell anything prior to the App Store. I was a recording engineer, and so I've always been pretty happy with Apple taking their 30% and, you know, hosting and sorting and curating and everything they do. So I've never been huge on that. I think it would be interesting, especially as a user. I mean, there's some stuff I think developers would put out, you know, and things you see in the jailbreak scene where you could do some really cool stuff if Apple allowed that, and maybe there would be a kind of Cydia type store for, you know, legitimately sideloading apps. But it you know, it's not really on my radar as a business opportunity, especially because I just don't think Apple's ever going to do it.
Seth, you're a cross-platform kind of guy. Do you miss it when you're on iOS?
I don't really miss it because I feel like the App Store reliability is worth that trade-off in that case. Like, there's one place to go. You know, when you hit install, the majority of the time, it's going to work flawlessly. And especially if you're talking about it from a development perspective, where if you didn't have the App Store, you'd have to host the app somewhere and pay for the server and pay for, you know, all that stuff. It's definitely a great way for developers to distribute apps. We've done work, though, for clients where they're in-house enterprise apps, and I've seen how easy it is to just put a one-page website up that's really nicely designed, that has a single link, and you click and you download, and it just installs the app just like it came from the App Store. The only difference is that it says, do you want to install the app such and such from whoever? So as much as the App Store is great, I think it'd be awesome to have another way to do it. But like you, I don't see that happening. I think that's something that Apple will fiercely protect, that overall, you know, encompassed experience.
So the last thing is Apple is going to be doing WWDC. We're going to be at the keynote on Monday. David will be there. Seth will be there. We couldn't drag Georgia to a developer conference maybe if we paid her money, but it would have to be a significant sum of money. But Apple has started decorating Moscone Center already, and they have put up their slogan, and I'm just going to bring it up so that I get it. Unless either of you have it in front of you, I want to make sure I get it right. Where great ideas go on to do great things. I don't see any tea leaves to read into that. Does anyone have any last WWDC obviousness before we stop?
I don't think there's any tea leaves to be read into that necessarily, except that they're right. I mean, you know, and I think this is a good closing note for me. As much as I bitch and moan and, you know, talk about the challenges and say Apple could have done this differently, or I wish they'd do that differently, the App Store is an incredible place to do business, and we're, you know, still, I think, in the infancy of mobile platforms and mobile software. And, you know, I feel incredibly privileged to be working in this. And that little slogan sums it up so well, that if you've got a great idea and the backbone to execute on that idea, you can do some really incredible things with mobile software these days. And as much as we think, you know, 600,000 apps in the App Store have kind of solved every problem, I think there's a lot of great ideas, and even my timer app, you know, there's probably 200 timer apps in the App Store, but I took a different approach. You know, I tried to make the ultimate one-tap timer, the ultimate in simplicity and refinement,
the zen of timers.
Exactly. And so, you know, I think there's so much room still for innovation. I think, you know, the future is bright, and it's exciting to be working on such a great platform. And for all the bitching and moaning, I think Apple does a great job empowering developers, both with amazing hardware, great APIs, development support. You know, they work hard at making a great platform.
It's Syracusean. We complain because it's worth complaining about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
David, where can we find out more about you?
Dr. Barnard on Twitter or appcubby.com.
Awesome. Seth Clifford, sir?
Seth Clifford on Twitter. You can find me on Iterate with Rene and Mark of Bajengo. And if you want to check out some of the stuff we do, nickelfish.com.
Georgia?
On Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB, and if not, on the website.
And you have a Zen and Tech coming up next?
We do. We have a Zen and Tech coming up, and we have a guest, Rene.
We do. We have another David, not David Barnard. We have David from 52 Tiger and Tua joining us to talk about stress at working from home, the stresses and tribulations of working from home, which a lot of us can identify with.
Ooh, I'm going to stick around.
Awesome. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can visit us at imore.com. You can leave a comment on the show when it goes live, or you can email us at podcast@imore.com. We are here each and every week, and I'd like to thank our chat room for just being extraordinary. We did get some feedback saying that they like the other Mobile Nation shows where people answer questions from email or voicemail, and we're going to start doing that after WWDC. We had a lot of stuff to get in beforehand, but I think there'll be a ton of stuff. We may do a whole Q&A episode after WWDC. Should be fun.